In this video, we will be discussing how to select rows and columns from a Pandas DataFrame using Loc and Iloc. First of all, let's download the database that we will be using. We will be requesting the dataset tips from the library Seaboard. So this is it. We have the information that we want. Let's inspect the 10 first rows, the first 10 rows. So the first thing to say, to know, is that the main difference between Loc and Iloc is that Loc will allow you to select a subset of rows and columns from a data frame using axis labels or Boolean arrays. So you will be able to access a set of rows and columns by using axis labels or Boolean arrays. On the other hand, Iloc will allow you to access a group of rows and columns using integer location indexing. So in this case, you will use integers in order to select a subset of rows and columns. Okay, so let's take a look at the first example. Suppose that you want to select in this data set, in this data frame, you want to select all of the columns included and only the rows in index 0, 2, and 4. So in this case, if we want to select them by using labels, by treating the index as a label, then we need to use Loc. So let's take a look at this. Loc, how do we say that? Well, because we have a list that is not continuous, then we're going to be opening square brackets to include the rows that we wish to get. So for example, in this case, we want 0, 2, and 4, then comma, and we're going to be writing a colon because we want all of the columns in this case. So in the method Loc takes two arguments. So the first one is going to be at the left of the comma, and it is going to include the rows that you want to select, while at the right of the comma, you will be including the columns that you want to select. So rows at the left, columns at the right. In this case, because we want a list that is not continuous, then we need to open square brackets. So let's run this line of code and we see that it is exactly what we wanted. So for example, if we want to select a continuous set of rows, so in this case we're going to be writing df-loc, assuming that we want to select all of the rows from 0 to 4. So in this case, we're going to be writing 0, 4, comma, and colon, because we want all of the columns in the data frame. So in this case, if we run this line of code, well, we have exactly the request that we were doing. So in this case, you can also write this code. You don't need to write this 0. If you write only colon 4, comma, colon, Python is going to be, or the method Loc is going to be interpreting this lack of precise label, is going to be interpreting as you wanting to get from the beginning up to label 4 in terms of the rows. So this should give us exactly the same output as with the previous line of code. We can do also, for example, df-loc, and then we want all of the rows starting from the row 250 up to the end of the data frame and all of the columns. So we run this line of code and this is going to be the output. So this is when we want to select a subset of rows. We can do exactly the same in terms of columns. Because the Loc method takes the labels, then we can say, for example, df-loc colon in order to select all of the rows in the dataset, comma, and for example, let's select the only the row, the column that is called total bill. So in this case, we write the name of the column inside or at the right of the comma, and this will give us return a series containing the values of that row, of that column, for all of the rows included in the dataset. So this is a series. If you want this same information to appear as a Pandas DataFrame, the only thing that you need to do is to add a square brackets and run the line of code, and the same information is going to be appearing in the form of a data frame. You can do this for one or several columns. For example, if you want to, let's take a look at the data frame, at the head of our data frame, to see the names of the columns. And let's suppose that you want all of the rows and you want only two columns, the columns total bill and the column smoker. So you will be writing dfloc colon, if you want all of the rows, open square bracket in order to include a list, you include your total bill and the name of the second column, which in this case is going to be smoker. Run this line of code and you will be receiving this output. So notice that this is when you want to select two columns that are not continuous. But you can also do that whenever you want to select continuous rows. So for example, we want to select in the data frame from total bill to smoker, the four columns that go from total bill to smoker. So in this case, we're going to be using dfloc, open parentheses, all of the rows, and then we're going to be writing total bill, in this case, colon, and then smoker. Notice that in this case, contrary to the previous example where we needed to include the square brackets in order to get a list of non-continuous columns, in this case we do not include them inside square brackets. It is only the two names separated by the sign colon. Okay? So this is the way that you can select the columns. But it is very important to note that the method loc can also take a boolean or a list of booleans as the result of one of many conditions to select some rows. So let's suppose that we have in this data frame the column total bill. Let's suppose that you want to select all of the rows that are going to be greater than, say, 40, and we want to get all of the columns. We can do that very easily by using dfloc. So let's say in this case dfloc, and then at the left of the comma, we're going to be specifying our condition for the selection of the subset of rows. So in this case, we said that we want all of the rows where total bill is higher or greater than 40. So df total bill is going to be higher than 40. Okay, and then we specify comma and column because we want all of the columns in the data frame. So in this case, this is going to be the output. So it is going to be giving you all of the rows where the column total bill is greater than 40, and we just verify that this is the case. You can use also several conditions in order to select your rows. It is not you can use more than one condition. Let's suppose that, for example, you want the all of the rows where the column smoker is equal to yes and the total bill is greater than 35. So let's take a look at the code that you would use in order to make this request. So we have a comma. At the left of the comma, we include the conditions for the rows, because that's going to be the selection of rows, and at the right, we include the columns in the data set. So in this case, we're going to be focusing on the rows, and we're going to be saying that we want all of the columns. So because we have more than one condition, then we need to open brackets for the amount of conditions that we have. So in this case, we have 2. So in the first parentheses, we're going to be writing the first one. I want the column smoker to be equal to yes. Okay, so df smoker is going to be equal to yes. So this is my first condition. And I want my second condition that the total bill is higher than or greater than 35. So total bill higher than $35. Then comma and the column that requests all of the columns in the data frame. So let's run this line of code and we can see that the smoker, the output is all of the rows, whereas smoker is equal to yes, and the total bill is higher than $35. So we can, of course, request more than one column. In this case, let's suppose that we're not interested in the totality of the columns in the data frame. What we can do, for example, is to specify that we want, for example, only the columns that go from smoker to size. So we can say that in this case by specifying smoker and size, for example. In this case, we're going to be having only the set of continuous columns that go from smoker to size, meaning smoker, day, time, and size that satisfy the two conditions that we have established in order to select the rows. If we want, for example, to only two non-continuous set of columns, we can say, for example, I want to select only smoker and size, not all of the continuous columns, only these two. Then I need to include them in square brackets and separate them with a comma. So in this case, you have these two columns. So this is with regard to the loc method. Now let's move on to Iloc. Iloc, as we said, will allow you to select a subset of the rows and columns from a data frame using integers. So let's take a look at, let's remember the beginning of our data frame. So this is our data frame. So let's suppose that doing the same exercise, but this time we want to select the rows 0, 2, and 4, but using the Iloc method, which uses integers in order to select the subset of rows. So you write that df Iloc square brackets, and in this case, suppose that you want rows 0, 2, and 4. So we need to include them in the square brackets because this is a list of non-continuous integers in this case, and we want all of the columns in the data frame. So we run this command and we see that we have obtained the requested set of rows. Now, it is very, very important to keep in mind that when we are using Iloc to select continuous rows or columns, for example, from row 0 to 2, we need to write this. For example, df Iloc. If we want, for example, the only two rows, the continuous rows that go from 0 to 1. So in this case, we need to write 0 to 2 and then column for all of the columns. So in this case, when we write 0 to 2, we are saying, and this follows the Python rule, that is going to go from 0 to 2, but excluding 2. So we're going to be receiving only the indices 0 as well as 1. Okay. So remember that, for example, this is the rule for a lot of operations in Python. For example, if you want the range from 0 to 5, we write this one, and what you are getting is, for example, for I in the range 0 to 5, print I. So in this case, you will be receiving from 0 to 4. A list of numbers that range from 0 to 4. That means that you want to go from 0 to 5, but excluding 5. So this is the Iloc, follows exactly that same rule. So we need to pay attention to this requirement. So for example, if we want to choose from the indexes, the rows, the 3 rows that go from index 0 to index 2, then we write df iloc 0 to 3. This is going to go from 0 to 3 excluding 3, and then we want all of the columns. So we will receive the rows in index 0, 1 and 2. So you can write this as we have previously discussed, df iloc, then 3, nothing, and 3, comma, colon, and this will return you, give you exactly the same output, because Python is interpreting that whenever you don't specify anything, that it is from the beginning. So df iloc can also take this form. You want from rows 240 up to the end, and you want all of the columns. So from row 240 up to the end of the data frame. Very interestingly and very useful, this is very useful, iloc can also take, for example, this form, -4, meaning that you want from row -4, meaning from 240 up to the end of the data frame, and you want all of the columns. So this will give you the same output as previously. You can also use for several the iloc to select several non-continuous columns. For example, suppose that you want to go from to select the 5 initial indices from 0 to 5. So you would write 0 to 6, 0 colon 6, comma, and then suppose that you want to select the columns sex, day, and size. So you want to select a set of uncontinuous columns. So you would open a square brackets for a list, and then inside you would specify the columns or the names as pardon. So in this case, not the names because you were using iloc. So we need to specify the position, the integer-based location of these 3 columns, sex, day, and size, and we see that sex has the position 3, 2, because it starts with 0, 0, 1, 2, day has the position 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and size has the position 6, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So in this case we set 2, 4, and 6. And we will be receiving these columns in our in the output from using iloc. So this is the range from 0 to 6, excluding 6, meaning for rows from 0 to 5, and the columns 2, 4 that correspond to the positions 2, 4, and 6. So now we can also select a set of continuous columns. Suppose that we want the rows again iloc and the rows again 0 to 6. but we want to select a set of continuous columns. For example, from 3 to 6. This is going to be returning these, the one that is in position 3, 4, and 5. So that means from position 3 to 6, excluding 6. So this is because Iloc, as we said, takes integers as arguments, and the same rule applies as previously, as in the case of rows. So if you want the column in position 6 in addition to these ones, then you need to write, you can write, for example, because we know that the position 6 is at the end of the data frame. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 is the last column. Then we can write, for example, df iloc 0 to 6, comma, 3 to up to the end of the data frame. So that is the way you can make your request. So this is very convenient in whenever we are dealing with very, very small data frames or data frames that have a very small number of columns. But whenever we're dealing with a data frame that has a very, very large number of columns, well, it becomes a little bit more difficult to count from 0 to the number of that column. So in this case, knowing the position of the column is going to be, we can request the position of the column by using the following. For example, df column, this method is going to be returning, is going to be returning a list of all of the columns that are included in the data frame. So let's take a look at our data frame, and we see that these are the 6 columns included in the data frame. Now, there is a method that is going to be helping us, that is going to be allowing us to get the exact location, the exact position in terms of an integer of a particular column. So we write df columns dot get loc, and in parentheses we include, for example, the name of the column that we want to know the position. So for example, I want to know the position of day. In this case, I write the name of the column, and this is telling me that day is in position 4. So we can verify this very easily. So total bill is position 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is day in position 4. You can do exactly the same thing for all of the other names of the columns. For example, tip, and this will give me the position 1 because tip is 0 and 1. So in this case, it becomes very, very easily to use to combine with the iloc function from 0 to 6. I want the rows from 0 to 6, and I want a list of the uncontinuous columns 4 and 1. So in this case, it will return the columns day and tip using the method iloc. So this is how we use the methods loc and iloc in order to get subsets of rows and columns in a Pandas data frame.